You are listening to the Money Hour at 11:50 a.m. KKNW, the Friday, December 18th virtual show. Because of COVID, our show is temporarily moved virtually. You can also listen to us on podcast or on air on Saturday at 3 p.m. with a rebroadcast on Sunday at 8 a.m. I am your host, Tina Mitchell.
And I'm your co-host, Keelan Harvey.
We are here to help you build a strong financial blueprint 1 week and one show at a time. If you are hearing our show at a different time or day, you are listening to a rebroadcast. We are here to answer any questions or connect you with the guests that we have on the show today. Please call the show at 1-855-400-1150. Again, that's 1-855-400-1150 or online at themoneyhour.com. And now in studio, we have Peter Smith of Apex Law Group. You are not your business, corporate law for small business owners, right here on 1150 AM KKNW. Peter, welcome to the show.
Thank you so much for having me. I'm really happy to be here.
Absolutely. And a little bit about Peter. Peter is the managing member of the Apex Law Group in Seattle, Washington, and adjunct professor at Seattle University School of Law and the University of Washington Law School, teaching for the nonprofit law clinic. Peter's practice primarily focuses on business and corporate law, whether for profit, nonprofit, or otherwise. When he's not practicing law, Peter's time is devoted to parenting his 4 children, which we learned on the show today. 2 of those are actually twins. And Susie, one of our other guests, she has twins as well. And our engineer behind the scenes has twins. I had to shout that out there because it was kind of exciting to hear that. So if he's not with his 4 children or on increasingly rare occasions, you can find him in the mountains, hiking, or skiing.
Peter, you big stud, you. I have one daughter, 5, about to be 5, and then I have another one on the way. So we're 19 months. It'll be halfway in next week. And so between that and teaching and the law firm and everything, high five to you, my friend. You are getting it in life right now, for sure.
Thank you, Keelan. Thank you. And congrats to you, mate. But I should say, so because in case my kids are listening, they actually aren't twins. Close in age, but actually not. So anyway, just in case they listen and hear that is not the case.
Irish
twins. Sorry for the incorrect information there.
I'm sorry. No, it's okay. We're still good.
Anyways, corporate law, I know that's kind of generalized term. So I'd be curious on what you actually do with at your law firm.
Yes, good question. So, and before I dig too far into it, I am ethically bound to say that what I'm about to say is educational purposes only. It's not meant to be legal advice. And if there is anybody who, writes calls or asks questions, I ask that they keep it hypothetical because I can't answer any specific questions about your specific situation, Okay, so what is corporate law, business law? This is typically starting with entities, what kind of entity your business operates out of, an LLC, a corporation, things of that nature, which I'm excited to tackle in today's sort of interview. But generally what we do is a lot of just keeping your business above the law, right? Making sure you're compliant with a lot of the different regulations that might apply to your business, employment law, making sure that all the different parts of your business and the relationships are well kept and, like I said, above the law, right? Whether they're shareholders, board of directors, officers, managers, employees, all the different pieces that relate with the business internally.
So Peter, can you explain a little bit more about the difference in corporate law?
Yeah, I'd be happy to. So what I want to talk about mostly is that you are not your business. And I like to say this, especially now with the rise of the gig economy and so many solopreneurs and different people out there who are operating as a, in a solo capacity. And that's to say that you don't have to be your business. You can create a business entity, something that is not you, but actually a new person under the eyes of the law. And what you can do is run your business through that new person. And how cool is that? You can sort of separate yourself and give yourself a little bit of distance between what it is you do at your day job and, your own personal life. And this is really cool for a number of different reasons. But one of them is this: if your business fails, you don't fail. And that's really a cool thing from corporate law, right? And it's one of the ways that we've driven a lot of wealth in this country, is that you can be entrepreneurial and get a lot of assets into this separate business entity, and it might fail, but your home, right, your car, whatnot, that stuff's not going to be, those things aren't going to be attached to the liabilities of your business. Okay, so long as you do it right and you follow sort of the corporate formalities that are necessary and you set it up. And I just want to make sure that your listeners know, even if you're a solopreneur, small business, whatever, you can take advantage of corporate law, and actually fairly cheaply too, and you really should.
Peter, that's so important nowadays, because it's, with technology, you got your TikTokers and your YouTubers and your Amazon businesses. People get this misconception that you have to have this big company before you can benefit from corporate law. And those protections reduce that risk for people, which pushes more people to have the courage to go out there and do something for themselves, which is scary in itself. So I commend you on what you're doing there. What else can you tell our listeners, or for those solopreneurs out there, what they can benefit from as far as corporate law is concerned?
Yeah, great question. So what I like to tell people is that we're constantly under the jurisdiction of two separate jurisdictions. So thinking about, your state where you live, and we're in Washington state right now where we're recording. So, Washington, and then the federal government, right? Because it's going to want to take its tax bite from whatever it is you're doing. And so if you keep those two jurisdictions in mind, it's really going to help you sort of do entity planning, business planning, things like that. And Keelan, here's why. If you're just your business, then all the money that's coming through you yourself, your business, that's all income tax, which is typically at a higher rate than a corporate tax, right? Even if you're a solopreneur and you go and set up an LLC, you can have certain federal tax elections. We call this an S corp election, and that you can make that can separate some of that income to be business income that's taxed at a much lower rate than your overall income tax. So there's a tax benefit to doing this, right? And that's the most immediate sort of money hour benefit that I can say you should look into. But second, like I said, was the sort of the liability protection, and I kind of discussed that before, which is you separate yourself, and then if that business doesn't make it, or it has a liability, or heaven forbid somebody gets hurt from what that business is doing, your personal assets are protected. Okay, and then the third thing is, and we've had some great guests talk about your own well-being and longevity and personal health and whatever. Well, the cool thing about a business entity is that it can live forever. It has perpetual existence, right? It's sort of this demigod, if you will. I mean, it can't die. And so that gives you a great vehicle for succession planning, or doing things like holding property and other things that may have a really, really long life. But so you can use it as a vehicle to pass on your business, maybe in a sale, most likely, or to your kids, or what have you.
Yeah, such great information, Peter. I have multiple businesses, and one of them, my mortgage software company that I opened up 10 years ago, I had a pretty significant investment and brought an investor into the company. So can you share and talk about, does adding partners or investors make a difference?
Yeah, great question, Tina. And I just want to point out for our listeners too, Tina's been a complete professional rock star because she's been battling the sun while she's doing this, hasn't missed a beat. I just thought that would be, for those listening, worthwhile.
Thanks, Peter.
Yeah. So if you have investors or another partner, now business entity law becomes just about crucial, because it's a really well-oiled way, well-recognized way to organize who's going to own what pieces of the business. We all think of it as percentage-wise colloquially. And who's going to manage the business, and then how to separate those things. Who gets to manage the day-to-day operations about what's going on the ground. But an investor, he or she may not know about technology or mortgages or whatever, and they're not going to want to interfere in the day-to-day. They're not going to want to be signing checks and, going to the bank account and depositing things and doing that kind of stuff. So it can organize the labor and ownership and separate all of those things out into different buckets appropriately. Not only that, but be sure you talk to an attorney before you accept anybody's money into your business, because there's very specific rules and regulations about, we call it securities law, about the securities of the business, the actual equity and investments. And if you're not registered on the New York Stock Exchange, which costs exorbitant amounts of money to just get there, you're called a privately held company, and there's some very specific rules and regulations you got to follow. Too much for this podcast, but make sure you talk to an attorney before you accept anybody's money in that capacity.
Did you hear that, listeners? Talk to your attorney before you do anything crazy. You got to talk to the attorneys and map it out first, all right? And I was just, when you were talking about that, I was just thinking, I can't tell you how many of my buddies come up with this idea, this harebrained idea, and now they want to do a business together. What about family and friends? What kind of difference does that make as far as investors or even joining an entity or creating an entity together? Does that make any difference?
It's a great question, Keelan. Let's talk about what happens if you don't form an entity and you get into that kind of business relationship. The law imposes a partnership on that business venture. So that's anything where people come together to do a thing, anything for money. We create a general partnership. And this is a really scary thing. And here's why. Remember how I said if you don't have an entity, you're liable for what happens? Well, now you're liable for what your partners do as well. 100% joint and several liability, your house, your car, your best buddy, your drinking buddy, you know, he's got this harebrained idea, whatever, you throw money together and he goes out and hurts somebody, harms somebody in this new business venture somehow, some way, you're also personally liable. Yikes. So that's why it's crucial to get a business entity in that way. And then the friends and family piece of it, you know, a lot of times my entrepreneurs like to think, oh, well, you know, my dad, my mom, my second uncle, my cousin, you know, they just threw me some money to help me get started. It's not really that big of a deal. Unfortunately, the law looks at that as still any old investor, right? And you got to follow those securities laws. And here's where it bites you. You might know your uncle, your cousin, your third cousin once removed, whatever, your friend. But then let's say they invest in this and then they die. Their estate, somebody else who's hungry for that business, that money, they can show up and you're not necessarily friends with them. Maybe you're not ready to be business partners with them. And that can be real big trouble if you haven't papered things right and set it up right.
Well, thank goodness you told me that, Peter, because the same ones that come to me with these harebrained ideas are the craziest friends I got. So I'm not going to be responsible for what they do. Let me tell you about it. That's
good.
Not a good idea.
Yeah, and I'm here to say, hey, if you got entrepreneurial ideas, go for it. Dive in, get with those crazy friends, make it happen, but protect yourself.
Absolutely. So, Peter, how does an entrepreneur choose a business entity type such as an LLC or a corporation?
Great question. So, typically, I advise people to lean towards an LLC unless I see a good reason not to be an LLC. So if you think, man, I don't have money to go get an attorney and whatnot, an LLC can do just about anything and everything you want it to, okay? Unless you want to be a nonprofit or tax exempt org, but that's different. So start there. Corporate entities sometimes are a lot more beneficial if you're going to take investment money. Why? Because the IRS rules and most investors, they know what they're going to get with a corporation. It's very rigid and regulated and pretty much the same thing, right? It's like going to McDonald's anywhere across the country. You know what you're going to get. An LLC can be a little bit more elegant and can be a little bit more customized. It's like going to a family restaurant somewhere in the United States, right? You can really make it a really cool creature of contract. And so if it's just going to be a small thing, I would typically lean towards LLC. If you're going to have investors or you need to issue shares of stock or make something really, really, really big, think about a corporation.
Well, Peter, thank you so much for being on the show today. Just a wealth of information. And the Money Hour is about everything regarding your money so that you can have the best quality of life for you and your family. And that takes protection. And that's what an attorney is. So, Peter, really appreciate you being here. And again, the wealth of information that you shared with our listeners.
Oh, man, you guys, thank you so much for having me. I love it. Love shows like this where people get to level up. Happy I could be a part of it.